Knock knock. Who's there? Doctor.
Doctor what?
Right. I'm gonna go straight in and say that, to be honest, I'm not really sure this episode was my type of thing. I think part of it is down to how it was promoted as the scariest episode ever by quite a lot of people and reviewers, but ultimately I felt slightly underwhelmed by the whole thing. First things first, why does Bill actually need a house to stay in or to rent? And no offence to her, but since when did she actually have friends? As for the whole student accommodation thing, she's not actually a proper student, she's just serving chips in the university canteen. I'm not saying it's implausible for Bill to have a social life by any means, but it seems unlikely to me that she'd be so friendly with the other actual students, given that she is privately tutored by the doctor. Furthermore, it's not been explained fully why Bill can't either stay living with her mother, although admittedly she is rather uninspiring, or simply have a room in the TARDIS. It also felt slightly disjointed to start the episode with Bill not in fact travelling with the Doctor, especially after such a continuous run of stories to start the series, and unfortunately to some extent, I think the Doctor-Bill dynamic that was developed so well, so carefully and successfully over the first few episodes felt a little bit diminished here, and it wasn't quite so present because they weren't really together until about halfway through the story. And I think part of that as well was down to the excess of guest cast. I know the plot required 6 students to make it seem believable for them to buy a house that size, but honestly I didn't really feel very attached to any of them, particularly because of how quickly they were each absorbed by the house. Now don't get me wrong, they were nice enough characters, and weren't written badly at all. However, I do think that 6 was perhaps a little bit too many characters for the space of a 45-minute story. One character I can't fault, however, was David Suchet's magnificent portrayal of the landlord. Despite having never watched Poirot, I understood the significance of having such a highly regarded actor in Doctor Who. Suchet added a real gravitas to the role that truly matched that of Capaldi, something we haven't really seen much of so far in his era. His stellar presence really elevated the story above average for me, in a way that actors of a different calibre could never have achieved. In particular, I found his emotional spectrum highly impressive, from the stern, creepy old man to the tragic regret of a young boy. However, much as I enjoyed Suchet's performance in the climactic scenes, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed by the story's conclusion, as I've already mentioned. To start with, giving a haunted house story such a personal twist is very reminiscent of Series 7's Hyde. That said, I felt that Knock Knock's emotional strand was executed 10 times better than the Crooked Man's bizarre romance. Maybe it's just because I was watching it for the first time, but the quick succession of twists felt quite random to me. I think also that I found the main twist that Eliza was the landlord's mother ultimately unsatisfying because of the way it was handled in the context of the narrative. Even though the scene had emotional weight, I thought the link to the freshers' party, fireworks and new life was a little too tenuous, and unfortunately it came across as a bit cheap to me. That both the landlord and Eliza were then consumed by the house only made matters more confusing. While it was definitely an unnerving image to end their story with, I didn't really feel a sense of closure. Surely the little tiny woodlice creatures are still out there, even though the house collapsed. What became of them and Eliza? And, come to think of it, why did they actually help her out in the first place? I can't help but feel that maybe, if less time had been taken setting up Knock Knock as a behind-the-sofa style story in the first act, there might have been more time in the second to explore these concepts further. But alas, it was not to be. One other thing that I cannot fault at all, however, is the prosthetic work done on Eliza. Millennium Effects have really outdone themselves with this one. What a spectacular piece of work. The combination of the realistic wood grain effect and the choreography, no doubt Elsa Burke's input, created a truly petrifying end result. Credit must also go to Maria Gale, who wasn't shown up by Suchet when acting opposite him, instead giving a performance that was just as profound. A great example of departments working together to create something truly extraordinary. And finally, just before my overall verdict, I feel obliged to briefly touch upon my theories about who could be inside the vault. The latest issue of Doctor Who magazine, which I naturally have managed to completely devour within 48 hours of its release, revealed that we will in fact find out the identity of the person or thing that lurks underneath St. Luke's University in episode 6, much sooner than most, including myself, had anticipated. Well, like many others, after tonight's episode, I can't help but feel it's Missy in there. It really wouldn't surprise me at all. For starters, the Doctor seemed quite keen to emphasise a few parallels between him and them, and appears to have a much more intimate relationship with whoever it is than Nardole does. If not Missy, then maybe a family member of the Doctor's perhaps? However, I interpret the contrast of this person's exceptional musical skills with the fact that they seem to be giving the Doctor the silent treatment all the time, not to mention the general implication that they are a formidable, dangerous presence worth guarding, as all indicating that this person is psychologically unstable and troubled. Surely only Missy fits that bill. Or is it just another Moffat's red herring? Oh well, only 2 more weeks until we find out for sure. So overall, what did I think of Knock Knock? Well, ultimately, I felt a little bit underwhelmed, and based on my initial watch, I found it the weakest episode of Series 10 so far. That's not to say it didn't have its strengths though. Some truly stunning performances from Maria Gale and David Suchet, lots of atmosphere, and a couple of really interesting concepts. It's just a shame, in my eyes, that the climax of the plot wasn't pulled off quite so successfully, and it wasn't quite as radically terrifying as previously billed beforehand. So as always, thank you very much for watching this review, and please do comment your thoughts on Knock Knock in the comments below. If you haven't yet watched my previous Series 10 reviews, then please go and do that now, and of course, if you're new to my channel, please do subscribe. But other than that, thank you so much for watching once again, and I'll see you next week for my review of Oxygen.